looking kind of weird, but I pulled my back, so it is what it is.
I thought it was quite fashionable.
Thank you. A colleague on another call for community college system just told me they thought I was wearing like a Harrison Ford fur vest.
Oh.
And I was like, no, not going with the Sonny Bono look today. It's bad.
How'd you pull your back out?
Oh, I think honestly it's sitting at this computer hunched over on Zoom, to be honest. I ordered a new chair today because I've been sitting in a dining room chair, which is not very ergonomic.
Oh. Yeah, that'll do it. Awesome. All right, should we go ahead and get started? Are we expecting Sandy?
I know he's finishing up a budget meeting right now. I just left it, so I don't know if he's going to join us after this or not.
All right, well, why don't we get started? And if he joins, that's fine.
Yep, and I did put this on live stream, so that's all set up.
Cool. Thanks, Diane. All right, so we have 3 core agenda items today. So the first is just to review the progress on the curriculum and assessment action plan. And Monique, thanks for sending that in advance. I might ask you to, as you're going through it, just pull it up on the screen and share if you don't mind. And then I think that'll flow nicely into budget planning and implications that we can talk through. And then finally, just have a brainstorm on our formal description, which I took a stab at doing just so we had a place to start from. And just, unfortunately, I had a meeting booked in my calendar at 3, so I do have to hop off at 3, which I apologize for, but hopefully that still gives us enough time to go through everything.
We'll work at being succinct then.
All right, thank you. Cool. Monique, over to you.
All righty. I'll share the screen just to share the document. Next time around, I think what I'll do is just have Kelly link it into the agenda so it'll be permanently there to reference, because this is how I stop and think about what's going on and what's happening. So in these sections, comprehensive education planning, instruction, curriculum assessment, and technology, those are the big buckets of the work, and certainly a lot of the work crosses over. For example, in the area of technology, there's a whole lot of curriculum pieces as well. It's actually, my participation is all curriculum oriented. So I'm just going to give you a couple of highlights of all of these projects that are going on, but please ask any questions from anywhere. We'll talk about the position, the reconfigured position closer to the end of this piece, because I do want to go into it and respond to questions. If you recall this, I'll just give you a little bit of an overview. This position is the result of the elimination of the improvement strategist and the K-12 tech specialist. And then we took a look at the district-wide librarian position and information specialist, and then some of the reduction in the technology department as well. So the big piece, first line highlighted, is the district's strategic improvement plan. That document outlines 4 focus areas that we've had in place for quite some time. We build goals off of that every year. And this year, a big focus obviously is the social emotional learning in particular, and including the diversity, equity, and inclusion work that we've been doing. And so that's sort of the umbrella for all of our work this year. More specifically, we have ESSA is the Every Student Succeeds Act. It's the, it followed the No Child Left Behind Act. Those are federal funds which come through the state and provide us with funding in the district. Most of that funding is based on our Title I numbers, which is based on our free and reduced lunch numbers. We're hovering at about 15% in our district. There's one Title I school in Scarborough, that is the Wentworth School. So I manage those projects. Title I-A, we're providing, our Title I-A monies are going to support literacy and writing at Wentworth School. Our Title II-A is around professional development, and we're leveraging that in 2 areas. One, in terms of the SEL work, as well as in technology support at the middle school. We had to beef up that position as a result of the instructional coach reductions. There was a trickle effect there in terms of positions and programming. And then lastly, Title IV is completely allocated both in terms of supplies and services, which is professional development towards the SEL work. So as you can see, we take our federal grant funds and really allocate them towards our goals in the district. Go ahead.
I just have a question on Title 1A, and apologies for my ignorance on this, but if it's just Wentworth that is a Title 1A school, is it possible that that would shift as the students shift?
Yes, it's possible. There are a couple different ways in which we can qualify a school, because in the past, gosh, for years and years and years, maybe 20 years, Eight Corners School always qualified, and we want to get those intervention services at the younger grade levels, but we were unable to do so because of the bubble at Wentworth. So that said, and we are always looking across the district in terms of comparability, whether we have sufficient services in any one place or another. And Title I funds can't supplant local funds. It has to be in addition to. So what we did as a result of the pandemic was we've added positions in the area of writing as well as literacy support.
Okay. Thank you.
And certainly our equity work is consuming a lot of my time, rightfully so, in that it falls under the SEL piece, but we have a whole lot of activity going on. One of the things I want to do is to be able by group or project to be able to sort of track the steps that have been going on. But just in short, as you know, this coordination of efforts, visual, I won't go into it, but I've been meeting with all of the groups at the bottom of that document to share just what's going on in terms of equity work, whether it's professional development, whether it's the survey that's gone out, whether it's student groups and their activities. I've got the RSVP group, high school group, to meet with on Thursday, and that will be it in terms of this communication. I'm really excited, and there is excitement across all groups because at every layer of our organization, we have involvement and commitment. And so it's very exciting because it's systemic. We have a real shot at making some systemic changes. And as the board looks to hiring a new superintendent, I'm sure that's going to be an area or criteria that you're going to be looking for, whether that is in the hiring of a new superintendent, whether you're looking for diversity, or whether or not you're looking also for their experience in the candidates at coordinating improvements in this area and their ability to facilitate improvements in this area. So the board has really has the opportunity with that new position, and we're looking across all positions in terms of hiring to bring on more diversity. So that is pretty exciting work. It's been a long time coming. Communication planning also falls under this, is keeping the community informed, and I'm sure you've seen the weekly community newsletters. We've also started a monthly staff update, and I'm not sure if the board has seen those or not. There is a link in there. It's a SMORE newsletter.
Yeah, you get those.
You get copies of those? Okay, great. The intent there is to have, it has all the sort of the don't forget kinds of informational pieces that we also roll out through. Each school has weekly newsletters with staff as well, but there be a theme to each of these. And at the bottom of the newsletter, you can go back and see what the theme was to access resources. So at last count, I believe, let me see, at last count, there were 787 visits. And that could be one person coming back 786 times. But more than likely, it's quite a few people. Interestingly enough, that monthly newsletter went out on a Friday about a little bit before 4 o'clock. And before the next day, there were over 250 hits. So for a Friday afternoon, that wasn't too bad. Any questions about that big overarching pieces there?
I think for me, sorry, Shannon, I probably should have started off at the beginning because I think we've reviewed some of this like in the past, but I didn't know if maybe we should have started if you had any questions sort of how this came about and what like the history of this plan was.
I did meet with Monique a few weeks ago to try to get the lay of the land a little bit. So that was good. That's been helpful. And she did share this with me at that point, and we reviewed it then. I don't think that I ever heard the history of how this came about, though.
Well,
We're also pressed for time, so.
It was an attempt as I was working with Kathy Terrell that I always kept sort of a running list of projects just to stay sane and keep going and try and track things. And then when Kathy Terrell became the improvement strategist, it was like, okay, what's your role? What's my role? And so this is how we kind of divvied out the work. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks, Sarah.
So in and under quality instruction, the instructional coaches are key here because they work to help coordinate the curriculum in the buildings. So for example, as you know, there isn't a lot of teacher time for professional development or curriculum work, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So they work, I work with the instructional coaches and they work with the teachers in the buildings. We can't do curriculum work without the teachers. And so the instructional coaches, for example, last week I had a meeting with middle school ELA Justin Stebbins is the instructional coach at the middle school this year. And he's doing all content areas. So he's catching up and keeping up with our work there. And part of it is where do we want to go with our curriculum materials and get a sense from staff and that sort of thing. And then he's working on adding to the internal curriculum guide. We need that capacity and build that teacher leadership across the phase levels. The biggest challenge is time. And interestingly enough, in working with the folks at the middle school, folks are pretty tired. And I'm seeing that across all groups. I'm meeting with middle school social studies next week with Justin. Pretty tired. What I keep hearing over and over again is, and this is a budget implication conversation around time, is there's no time to do curriculum work, long range curriculum work, bringing K-12 teachers together. In the past, we used to do a release day and have everybody come together and we would map out the curriculum, make recommendations, do changes, come up with a little plan, and then they were off. We can't do that. There are no subs. And our students need us more than ever anyway. And so we're thinking, all right, maybe in the summer, maybe some other time, but the Wednesday afternoon time and their prep time, it just takes so much longer to prepare things. I'm worried about the diversity, equity, inclusion work. That's going to require time to do that professional development as well. So that you will hear that come up in the budget discussions, and that may not be a budget implication as much as a calendar question.
Monique, I'm wondering if you can move Sandy up to a panelist. It looks like he's on the attendee list, and I had given over my host responsibilities because I've got to pop out, so I can't put him in. You could do that.
I can move him too.
Thank you. All right. Sorry that I can't stay, guys.
No worries. Stay.
Later.
There he is. Thanks. I'm not really great with multitasking.
Hey, Sandy.
It is.
The library programming, with the absence of that position, I've been picking it up and doing the best I can, not having a library degree. It's a great group of folks, but we are going to need some help there to better manage that and the work that they're doing. The other area in and around instruction is what do we do with students who have what is called unfinished learning as a result of the pandemic? We used to run summer reading academies, and I was in the process of a math sort of an academy for summer. I'm starting to have conversations now with instructional coaches as well as academic support staff to say, what are some possibilities? And who are the kiddos? And we're also looking at the data there to identify those students. Are they just the students who are in academic support, or are they students that we're bringing in to school now because remote just isn't working for them? So that's going to be an ongoing conversation, and that I'll be spending quite a bit of time on, and I will be making a budget recommendation for that. As well as the other piece in terms of the RTI and looking at our data, we know we have at K2, actually into K3, we know we have a phonemic awareness phonics issue. There are kids slipping through and they're being identified later on. So we're leveraging, iReady has a dyslexia screening tool, and our instructional coach is working with our academic support folks at using that. The iReady data gives us a heads up on which students should probably be screened some more and kept an eye on. Luckily, that's not a lot of kids. I think across K2, there were only 22 students identified, which is not bad out of about 650 kiddos. But we do need to follow up with those students. And so they're working on those pieces. And I will probably purchase some materials because it does involve, we've got an issue within our curriculum, and it's been compounded because of the pandemic. The word work we used to do involved a lot of concrete materials and papers, and we're looking at some materials that might be able to enhance or replace that in light of our new environment. So those are the big pieces in terms of instruction. Questions about that? Time for PD is the real challenge these days. The curriculum coordination, the what and the how of what goes on in school. We are working on keeping the internal guide up to date as much as possible. Again, it is a resources issue. What I'd like to do this summer is bring the coaches together to do some updating and some shifting. The other piece that is a part of what I certainly do and takes some time this time of year is I work with Sue Ketch on the program of studies. And the program of studies, as you know, will be coming forward to the board, I think this February 4th, I think. And one of the roles of this committee, I would like to offer that it would be sort of the first stop in the program of studies before going to the board, because it does articulate the curriculum basically for our high school. The two links in the document, the link on top is the current program of studies. It's all web-based. Jen Adams, our technology coach, is working with Sue at making all the edits. If you go to this draft site, while it still says, it may say 2021 on there, there are some changes in place. So I'm just going to give you a few of the highlights right now. Sue and I have been talking about deletions and additions of courses. One is art and the Nazi era. That what originated from a teacher who's no longer with us. And last year when we offered it, it was very low participation. So we're going to cross that one out. The music department has been doing quite a bit of work, actually. They offered, as you know, AP Music Theory this year, but what they want to do is they want to alternate it and have music theory offered one year and then AP Music Theory offered the next year, almost like a sequence. So that'll be in the program of studies. Nick.
I just can't resist asking this question. The course art and Nazism, was that more historical about what happened to art during that period, or is it about art actually produced during
It's a little bit of both. It was a social studies course.
Okay.
And the idea behind that, actually, it is in the program, the description. And I worked with, I think it was Keith Magnuson who was interested in that. And he was interested in partnering with someone in the art department. And it really is about the use of visuals and its role in terms of propaganda, as well as art and the sort of the many works of art that were lost or stolen during that time. But it was really about looking at art in terms of communication during that time and propaganda.
Huh. Fascinating. Alarming at first, but fascinating.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It does catch your attention, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
it certainly does.
Seeing it without that context is shocking. Monique,
Um,
the question on the board's role here and your recommendation that the committee sort of be the first pass of this. You'll have to, and Nick, maybe you remember this as well, but I think when you presented this in the past, it's kind of just like a stamp of approval, right? It's more of like a administrative task. Is that fair? Like, were there a lot of recommendations that the board made?
I don't know that the board would make recommendations necessarily, but this would be a group to review the program of studies and ask lots of questions that we should be thinking about. I see this curriculum group as the reflecting the community and what the needs and wants of the community are in terms of programming for high school students. Nick?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say it's almost more valuable to have the discussion in front of the community than it is for the board. As far, not that it's not valuable for us, I'm not saying that, but it's almost like the discussion is more for the benefit of the community and knowing that the board is aware of the changes. But I don't see us being in a position where, frankly, I don't feel personally qualified to go and question decisions that came to these type of changes. So really, I think it's just our chance to ask for clarification for those that are watching and wondering about their kids.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I was getting to about the qualification part. Okay, so if that's the case, then this is a workshop first, and then we decide on it. Because if we're looking for feedback from the public, then we probably want to stagger it, right? I'm just trying to think about this like process-wise.
Yeah, this, it could, getting feedback from the public could look like any number of things. We'll let you know that we've always operated at the high school in terms of what students' interests and needs are. So many of these recommendations for shift come as a result of either, for example, the AP Music Theory, students wanting more in preparation for futures in music area. And so they want more advanced courses to take. And so these are offered and promoted, but we also, the department heads also have to look at what are the prerequisites for advanced coursework, and are we offering that opportunity to all? And so because the music theory piece, there are only 2 people in that department. So they're working together to be able to offer that in terms of alternate years. We just don't have the personnel to be able to do that every single year. So that's a way of organizing the curriculum so it doesn't necessarily do harm to students. The Music for Life is a redesign of a course called music production. So music production was recommended by the previous course instructor, and we purchased equipment. Kids wanted to learn how to do podcasts and music and recording and those sorts of things. A little bit different than what they might do in video production, because that's another area they might do that. When this new teacher took a look at the course and talked to students who were taking music production, they were making recommendations for making it more contemporary, authentic, and applicable, and quite frankly, interesting for them. So actually, I just got a title. The other purpose of the course is to engage more kids in music at the high school. So Renee, the department chair, just shared with me so I can review it, a title called Music, a Social Experience. And so I'm going through and reviewing that. That would be the text for this course. So there would be some budget requests going in there. And I just started looking at this, but one of the pieces that was pretty impressive here was really about musical identities and looking at music, not just from a Western cultural perspective, but about a multicultural perspective and looking at music and ethnicity. Music and gender, music and spirituality, all sorts of pieces and looking at it from different dimensions. And that's a lens that we're going to be looking at everything through these days. So that's part of the work. AP Studio Art, I think it will replace or enhance. This is the first AP Art, visual art course that we've offered. There had been requests for years, but teachers felt that students, and a lot of this is really putting together an art student's portfolio for further education should they move on to an art program. And I think it was design was the most advanced course. But what they're looking at is offering AP Studio Art to help students put their portfolios together. And again, in art, there are lots of different electives that can be identified. And so they will work together sometimes. And so you might have a teacher teaching AP Studio Art, but paralleling that with the design course, which isn't necessarily an AP course, but is similar in terms of the curriculum. So they're open to doing that in order to get this off the ground. I think there'll be quite a bit of interest in this because it's come up over the years.
Minnie, just another sort of process question on this and maybe recommendation. When you're presenting the program of studies to the board for action,
Typically, Sue Ketch presents it.
well, I guess either you or Sue, when it's presented, are you able to indicate those changes that have budget implications if you aren't already planning to do that? Because that's
Yes.
I'm just trying to figure out what like our role in approving this is, and if it's really just a mechanism of communication to like that makes sense to the town, then that'd be great. But if we're approving something, then that we then a couple weeks later say we actually want to cut that from the budget, then those conflict with one another. So I want to make sure we're clear about that.
And that's a tricky thing. One of the things that we're working on here is in terms of the supplies and materials for the new courses, looking at that so that those discretionary lines are offset by other savings. So that it's a reallocation, not necessarily a new budget request that sticks out a whole lot.
Right.
So like with the math curriculum, because that was, K right through 7, that had a large dollar amount attached to it. But your point is a good one. Typically what happens is in the curriculum budget at the district level, it used to be new adoptions would go in the curriculum budget, and they wouldn't be in the building budgets. And then what happens is that after the first year, after the adoption of that curriculum, then the budget costs, any budget costs would move into the building lines. So you might see some bumps in the building lines. We're working on that this year to see where we have efficiencies and savings so that it doesn't look like there's a bump in any one place, a huge increase in any one place. And I don't know if we'll be able to do that or not. So for example, the math curriculum, there was just no way to embed it just because it was such a massive ask. And so what will happen, these new courses will move forward. There's funds allocated to support them. We're careful to keep that in the budget. So when we do have to cut back on budgets, particularly in discretionary fund lines, we leave those in there unless we become very public about not offering those courses. And it's hard because you have to propose a course and you have the budget year, and sometimes it takes 2 years to make the full cycle before a course can actually launch and be properly funded.
Yeah.
So with the adulting course, we've been adding a little bit every year and moving that forward incrementally.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. I started last August a K-12 curriculum steering committee and leveraged instructional coaches and the lead teachers at each of the phase levels. Again, there is no curriculum work I can do without teachers and teacher involvement. And so we identified the essentials for this coming year. I'm going to want to pull that group together again to talk about where are we now, what do we want to focus on for next year. But again, I have not, have not been able to meet with them for just because, well, K-12 SEL has sort of taken priority. And we've done after school, outside of contract hours meetings, and we've funded the teachers their time to do that. It's just not cost effective moving forward in trying to get a lot of teachers involved. They're exhausted. And by the end of the day, we do like a 3:30 to 5:30 meeting with K-12 SEL. Just haven't been able to get these folks to the table. It's just calendaring. And then a piece to keep in mind budget-wise, that I don't know if it, I know you understand this, is that, but it becomes a bit of a challenge, is, for example, the literacy, when the teachers came together, made the recommendations for K-5 literacy, it was supposed to be a 3-year implementation. Then we were going to do science, and then we were going to do social studies at K-5. That became a 5-year implementation. So science and social studies have just been sitting. And in some respects, as we move forward with a diversity, equity, and inclusion audit, that makes some sense. But just so that, but there's also there's frustration for some teachers because they don't have current materials and supplies and know where they should be focused. Other teachers are pretty content doing what they want for those content areas. You know, they're more independent thinkers, and they have their activities they've been doing for quite some time and are just fine continuing to do that. So as we get into, and I'm probably not going to be able to allocate a lot of money in either science or social studies this year. And part of that is the time to work with teachers, more so than the stuff piece. I could put a really great curriculum together in a day, but you're just not going to have the buy-in from the teachers, and so we do need to spend some time coming together about what the learning goals are for students in these areas, the professional development in these areas, and then the materials teachers are going to need. So we put that science and social studies, particularly K-5, on a bit of a hold this year. One area that will have a budget impact is 8 through 12 math. Grade 8, our students follow the high school curriculum for pre-algebra, algebra, and some students are into algebra 2. So David O'Connor at the high school and Sue Ketch and I have had a conversation around a placeholder for budget and see where we might be able to put that. And then go through a selection process where we'll have the 8th grade teachers and the high school teachers working together, reviewing materials against criteria. Their curriculum materials this past year, they're just using pencil, paper, and whatever they've been able to put together, just because their online materials were flash-based and just no longer available. So when I spoke with David O'Connor last year, he said, let's just wait, give it another year. We'll get through next year, but we've got to start looking next year. Questions about the curriculum instruction pieces? So in the area of assessment, we've suspended some assessments so that you folks are aware. The state, although nothing has been public, the DOE assessment group has been communicating with superintendents and curriculum folks. They are under the federal mandate to assess, to provide statewide testing. The states that went forward to the federal government to ask for another waiver this year were denied. So the Maine decided not to ask for a waiver under the previous administration. I do finally have written confirmation that they are going to ask for a waiver for this spring under the new administration. I hope they do. If you have any connections there, it would be great. They have identified a solution. We used to do the Empower. The product was called Empower. It was quite long. It took weeks of testing. It was a bit of a bear technically, but I think they have severed their relationship or their contract with that organization. I think Cognio is the name of it, of the vendor. And while it's not public, they're probably going to go with the NWEA assessment. It's shorter, which is fine. And if they have to do that testing this spring, it's going to be in May, the same time we have our iReady testing scheduled. So this is kind of wicked huge. I have not shared this information with a whole lot of folks, just leadership, because I've got my fingers crossed. I certainly don't want to double test our students, but here's where it gets interesting. So we would be required by law to do the NWEA this spring because it's the requirement, but our federal grant data depends on our iReady data because we're measuring growth in SEL and we're measuring, we have 2 academic goals we have to have. So if we have to do that, my thinking would be to appeal to the commissioner. And even, I'm pretty sure they're going to go with the NWEA, which is fine. We will need to make some decisions about iReady though. One, technically they're both really good assessments, and we actually looked at the NWEA when we were identifying a universal screener for ourselves. We chose the iReady because of the online instruction stuff. If you were listening to Rose Pomerleau talk about iReady the other day, she talked about how she can watch the instruction and adjust it up and down. That's all part of that package. NWEA doesn't have the instructional components. What they do have though is they do have instructional partners, so we could go and purchase from their instructional partners. So I've had a couple of emails with the DOE asking, can we please have, if we've got to do this spring, can we have choice? Can we give you the data on our kids instead of doing the NWEA? And they basically said no. So I'm hoping for a waiver this year. If we don't have a waiver, I have some ideas about what we ought to do, but either way, knowing, even though it's not public, having pretty good idea that the state is going to purchase the NWEA, the upside of that is, it is a good assessment. The upside also is we would not have to pay for that. We could see a savings in the iReady. The downside of that is retraining our staff and taking the time to retrain our staff, A. B, what are the instructional pieces? We would need to purchase instructional components that align with the NWEA. Other than that, the NWEA being the state solution creates a bit of a monopoly or narrows the market for products, which is in my mind problematic. But either way, I think this is something Scarborough would make the shift because it makes sense for the entire state, for all kids in the state of Maine, and we would shift gears in order to support that.
And this recipe, Monique, that is implemented for like an extended period of time, right? Like it's not just a 1-year thing.
Well, let me give you a couple of, well, what they're saying is people are, districts are demanding the data this year because they don't have data. And yet 65% of the districts who do assess are NWA districts. So, and the contract, what I heard from people who are in the know is it's a 3 to 5 year, it will be a 3 to 5 year contract. So I don't think they would get into a 1 year contract anyway, but they're also looking at trying to do things a little bit differently. And they want some stakeholder input on the assessments, because I think the DOE really does want to go toward a more authentic project-based structure. But our hands are kind of tied with federal requirements.
And one other question on that, are there any like negative implications of taking on, no longer using that component of our iReady contract? Meaning, I think you said we'd see a savings, but is it like a bundled package? So if we drop that, our other things go up?
Yeah, we can still contract just for the diagnostic assessment.
Okay.
And my thinking is, particularly K2, the NWA would kick in grades 3 through 8. And it all depends on what they do. We would probably look to, the beauty of the iReady online instruction is it's automatic. Once that diagnostic is taken, it calibrates where the student should be in the online instruction. With the NWEA, I have not had a chance to explore the instructional partners or that other software, and I don't know how seamless it will be. So it's disruptive at the least, and it's going to take some time for teachers to shift gears in terms of reading reports, doing the assessments, those kinds of things. But it will be a cost savings for the district.
Given that it seems like the number one issue is time, that's not reassuring.
Yeah, yeah.
Thanks.
The last piece is technology coordination. The link is there for this, for the job description. We've got some pretty good candidates. We're looking to do interviews the first week of February. This is the piece that I can't keep up with teacher requests. And this is one of those challenges when in difficult budget times and you have to eliminate positions, all 3 of those have fallen on this office. And I have to be honest with folks, when a new tech request comes in, Dawn and I work together with that, but I can't turn it around in near the amount of time. The other thing is there's also an increase in demand for technology as a result of the pandemic. So the back-end support to check it out, do the student data privacy pieces, work with the IT, work with the technology coaches, get the application set up, get students rostered in there. We're trying to become more efficient about all of that. And trying to keep everything, all our subscriptions on the same renewal cycle at the very least, and roster our kids and use Clever to connect all those applications with who needs to have those applications. So when the student sits down to their device, they don't have to remember 6 or 7 different logins and passwords. They have a single sign-on solution. And they see the software that they have access to and they go to it and they're all set. It's a massive undertaking because just in curriculum alone, there are probably 114 different pieces of software. We're also connecting our systems, our student SIS system as well, and getting the right people in the right places connected to the right courses has also been a challenge. So this position, I'm looking for some help in working with the technology coaches, working with the software, the onboarding of staff, they have to be trained, the offboarding of staff. When we have staff retire, they need to move their stuff over. Students, seniors, they need to move their stuff over. So the technology coaches have stepped up there to help out, but it's really the software management of that and inventory of that and who has access to what that is a huge time piece. Not to just mention just the researching of the software and what does it replace, and then tracking the usage on that and the value of it. Is it really helping? Do we need to, all those kinds of things. It really, yeah, I can keep going on and on and on. So we're looking at this position plus library media specialist to help out with the libraries in terms of both programming, but collection development, their online databases as well. That's another huge technology area. And hoping that they can help out with some of the inventorying. The piece that we aren't doing a really great job in, that I would like this person to take on, is really, IT hasn't been able to do it to the extent that's necessary, is the training with staff on information security and student data privacy. We just, we would do an update every year. But it would be kind of this one long hour of throwing a lot of information at people at one time. My biggest worry is free software identified by a teacher for all the best of intentions, but then students enter their private data on that software and it's gone. So we're trying to do all the rostering, and that's a student data privacy piece, and we're trying to educate staff. We put together an approved software list that goes out to staff in the fall. We also have an approved list for free software. We have also put together guidance for students and for staff when enrolling or rostering or providing key codes to students for using free software. So that is, I joke when I say I miss the days of when we used to pick a textbook, it would come in and I'd stamp it and hand it out and then move on to the other content area. But this is ongoing and it's daily. But the opportunities for kids are just amazing. Just amazing. So I feel like I've just given you access to a fire hydrant's worth of water pressure, and you've got a little juice glass and you're overfull.
I appreciate the update. So Nick or Shannon, do you guys have any questions on anything Monique has covered?
Thank you. That was great.
Yes, thank you. It's a lot. You're absolutely right.
Monique, is there anything that, and maybe that's not budget related, that is like a barrier that we could provide support on or help to remove as a board?
One of the things, we are going to need to do some education with the community. And this is in particular, as we revamp curriculum, parents have lots of questions in terms of why. For example, it can look like, you're teaching math differently. And we do what are called parent universities, parent education universities. We've got some parents who want the comfort of the spelling list every week. And so our coaches are working on finding videos or pieces of information or research to help educate parents. And that's one piece that, particularly as we start making shifts in our social studies curriculum, and this is kind of a down the road issue, but I'm going to keep planting it. Our parents are going to need some help in understanding why we're shifting. So for example, I respond to parent emails around things like My child came home from school today and their child's teacher said that Columbus didn't discover America. And though that teacher is doing, and this is one of the pieces that the teachers are nervous about, that teacher is actually doing a wonderful job of presenting a shift, a more global perspective in and around Columbus Day. But our parents may not have that same level of awareness. And so any kind of support and promotion as we start making some of those changes, that it's not just a few teachers just becoming very forward thinking and just, you know, their education is just too liberal. And this is some of what is called the hard work with the diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And so the board's support as we move forward with those materials and those curriculum pieces, I do want to make it have more opportunities to talk with the entire board or present to the entire board the rationale for some shifts we well may need to be making.
Yeah, I think that's great, and that you know, I think Shannon and Nick, are either of you on the communications committee?
I'm on the communications committee.
I think you guys have a schedule, right? Or the idea is to build out a schedule. So that could be something, Monique, that like, you know, when you have, there are slots available in different levels of communication that are going out in different meetings, maybe like every one we just drop in something that it, relates to this matter in terms of parent education. So I don't know whether that's something, Shannon, maybe you want to take back to the communications committee and try to think about like how we can support Monique in the district on future communication around this.
Yeah, I can absolutely take that back. We, in fact, we looked at we had a meeting earlier today and we looked at our calendar and we were trying to fill out holes, you know, where we had some holes. So I would absolutely think this is something that could be a good fit. What I'll do is I will reach out to Leanne, and Kristen is the other member. I will reach out to both of them. Leanne's the chair, and I will copy you on the email, Monique, and that can at least get that conversation started for sure.
And I can look up some resources. You know, I'm a great proponent of what I refer to as the vitamin theory of is little bits of information at a time. I just want to make sure that, you know, I've been through new curriculum adoptions and they've been, you know, when you do, when we did ELA, okay, there's no more grammar. We're not teaching grammar. Why aren't you teaching grammar? You know, but you know, we do need to shift our social studies curriculum from a majority Eurocentric perspective. And that is, people are going to struggle with that by making that shift to a more multicultural approach. People are going to struggle to understand that. I just want to be ready and build that support over time.
Absolutely.
Sorry, I just realized I was on mute. I know you mentioned a couple of budget implications as you were going through this, Monique, but were there others that you didn't mention that you want to highlight?
The time piece is really the big hurdle right now for us, pretty honestly. Our folks are exhausted. They're tired. They're working a ton of hours, and I kind of take the balloon ride and look at organizations and talking to different groups. They are at that 1 week before February break level of exhaustion, and we still got a few more weeks to go. The big piece is as we designed this learning model and this schedule, I don't think we realize how much time it takes to craft great hybrid, synchronous, asynchronous lessons. You know, going back over it, I would, if I got to turn back time, I would ask for Wednesdays to be completely preparation time for teachers. and to do the curriculum work that needs to happen. Because those days, those Mondays and Tuesdays in the hybrid model and supporting the remote students is pretty overwhelming. I'm starting to look in the literature around, okay, how do we improve this hybrid model? We aren't the only district struggling with this. I'm going to be talking to my curriculum coordinators on Friday to see if they have any ideas. But it really, I think we really need to spend some time as a leadership council thinking about it right now, to try and make some small tweaks, or some large tweaks. And then what about next year? And so that's the piece, is that we're limited by time. And it's more a calendar issue, quite frankly, than a specific budget issue. There will be a budget request. The math for middle and high school will be a big request. We went through the high school requests today. Social studies was a concern given one of the listening sessions, but the department had a conversation, and that teacher received new materials last year, and they were not making any specific recommendations this year for more materials. Other departments were looking at materials, whether it be online subscriptions or concrete things. But they were really being careful about what they were asking for, given the challenging economic times we're going to be looking at here.
Okay.
And I'm meeting with middle school. Our budget meeting is tomorrow morning, so I'll have a better sense of middle school tomorrow morning and the other phase levels.
Okay. And I think maybe this is for Shannon and Nick, but in our last finance committee meeting, Kate talked about how they're putting together the budget this year, because you know, as of right now, I don't think anyone can predict what school's going to look like in September. And so there was a question around, you know, do you kind of put two budgets together? One is if we kind of go back to quote unquote normal. Another is if we're still in this hybrid model. And what Kate described as, and then maybe you can talk about how you're doing this in curriculum, is it's the budget number itself isn't going to change. How that money is allocated will change depending on the model. So if Monique asks for $1 million, she's going to ask for $1 million, but there'll be two different ways that we spend it depending on what September looks like.
Absolutely, and that's pretty much what has happened this year. I know in the curriculum budget anyway, I was very conservative about what people needed and asked for, so that we had the ability to respond when we needed to. Here's an example of that. With the state assessments situation, the state used to pay for the SAT. And we pay for the PSAT, that's in the, it's in instructional supplies under curriculum. And so the state pulled that rug out and announced this year that they weren't paying for it. So under instructional supplies, we had decided a while ago that we were not going to have students do the COGAT assessment, which is a reasoning abilities assessment, just because of the times we were in and all of those sorts of things. I also pulled back on and didn't move forward with science. There was some monies allocated for science. I haven't been able to get teachers together to talk about science, and what I've heard from them is they want to focus on the literacy and the math, and there just isn't time. So I reallocated those funds. I talked with Sue Ketch. I reallocated the funding that would have gone to COGAT and the funding that would have gone to the elementary science in order to help fund the SAT this year. I predict it's going to be the same kind of a situation next year. We're going to have to be very careful, but build some flexibility in order to respond to what surfaces.
Okay. Thank you. That's helpful. In terms of roles, will we see any new roles in the budget coming up next year for curriculum?
I'm sorry, I didn't get
roles. Positions?
Positions. I'm not making any recommendations out of central office. I think there is an interest on the part of Wentworth and the middle school to bring the instructional coaches back. We just haven't been able to even do the literacy and the math work because both of those folks are working part-time. I haven't been able to get the two of them in a meeting together at all this year. And a lot of the work, we pushed some of the work that they did onto the technology coach, which means she's less able to do some of the technology support pieces. At the middle school, I know there's a concern over that position, whether it looks like an instructional coach position or whether or not Kathy is going to look at something different. I'm not sure yet. I'll see what she brings to the table. But you've got essentially what you've got at the high school, which is one person trying to coordinate all the curriculum, and then a technology coach. And we weren't able to get Justin on board at the middle school for quite some time because he was teaching classes to help support a gap there. We were unable to find a position there. So those would be I think those are the two places that you might see requests come forward that would be connected with curriculum.
Okay. I just thought of another question, but it just left my brain. Nick or Shannon, do you guys have any budget implication questions? No. Okay. The question came back to me, just related to the biggest barrier, which you said is time. What are your recommendations for how we respond to that? Like, how do we change that moving forward for next year?
A couple of pieces or a couple of thoughts around that. In looking at the calendar pieces, I know that there are some constraints, but depending on what schedules look like and such for next year and the minimum numbers of students' days, is to have either an early release or delayed start on Wednesdays. And, allocate that for every Wednesday. I think that in the calendar conversations, I think the days ahead of time will go there, but there's only that leaves one full day over the course of the year. And so when I look at the work we need to do with staff, or that the staff want time to work on in terms of the curriculum pieces and the conversations cross-phase level, and then what the groups decide in terms of the diversity, equity, inclusion work, curriculum audit work, that's going to take more than just one Wednesday a month, which is allocated for PLT. And the after school time was reduced as a result of the negotiations process. So it becomes particularly challenging, but also know that as we create changes and improvements and try and find teachers' time, there isn't always agreement about purpose of time. I've noticed over the years that there are what I call organizational resistance to change. People might say that, oh, that PD is not valuable. That was a complete waste of time. Well, if it is in regard to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and it's information that district-wide we feel is important for teachers to have or to know, you might hear we don't need that time. And so, yeah. So it comes out in different forms.
Yeah. We got you.
Comes out in different norms. Why can't I just do what I want? Well, because that may not make sense for our students who are coming with prerequisite skills and moving on to other prerequisite skills. We want to build the building blocks. So yeah, it's always ongoing conversations.
So this is really valuable to me from just a board member, but also as finance chair, and hopefully Nick from negotiations chair and the chairman from a DEI perspective. Like, all these things are so interconnected, right? And we really, it's good that I think all of us are hearing this from you, Monique, directly, and maybe worth mentioning at some point in an update to the board as well. I can give it as part of our committee report, because we can't, one of our goals, right, is to progress the DEI work. But if we don't have a schedule or a budget or a curriculum that supports that, or a contract that supports our staff allowing them to work on this, then it's never going to be executed. So all these things align.
Yeah, we're gonna move forward. The way I look at it, we're gonna move forward. The amount we can move forward is only dependent on the limits of our resources.
Right.
And when I say resources, it's not just always money, it's staff energies as well. The other thing I'm noticing is the impact of the pandemic stress. So, resistance to me isn't always, I don't want to. It can also be, I just can't right now.
Yeah.
It can also be, I just don't know how, or when. So I don't always see resistance as I don't want to.
All right, real quickly, in the last couple of minutes, Monique, unless you had anything else to share.
I just wanted to add one quick thing, if I could. Kind of from the negotiations perspective, I think it could be really valuable if at some point we could have kind of a moment with the full board where we could talk about some of the professional development that is like from the system-wide, say I'm in Maine Community College mode, district-wide perspective, because certainly at the negotiations table, I have heard more than once about the utilization of time with PD, and they'd like it to be a lot more free-form. In fact, we just dissolved our liaison role that was kind of in the reimagination of professional development. So I think it'd be really helpful for the board to hear about some of the different trainings or professional development opportunities that are meant to kind of progress us as a district. And I'm sure we're going to have some come out of this diversity work that we're launching, right? But it does have to be a balance, Monique. You're so right about, that teachers need to be able to, and I'm picking on teachers because it's just the first thing in my head. They need to be able to pick the things that are relevant to their area and to their individual growth. But beyond that, it's as a district, how do we impact the overall student experience over 12 years? So,
right, and you hear a lot about the SEL work needs to be adult first. And so I'm depending on the K-12 SEL steering committee, teachers, counselors, and building leaders to make those recommendations. And we've started having some great conversations around, okay, the middle school is looking at this curriculum for all students, and we will need training for staff. But then it's like, well, wait a minute, shouldn't that be a K-12 conversation? Because what if 3-5 wants to go in a different direction? That might not make sense for kids. And so those are the conversations that we need to have. And that's those are the conversations I'm trying to have people have from 3:30 to 5:30 after a full day of teaching and being in front of a screen. And as you folks get it, as board members, you have your full day and then you go off to your board meeting, So that even just getting to those places is challenging. But if we could have some more time in next year's schedule, it would help move us forward, I believe. And I'm trying to get and focus on that K-12 group to make some recommendations for next year. That said, I'll be honest with you, there's hesitancy. There's real hesitancy to take anything else on or do anything else new because everything is so new and so different. And it's really fascinating because there's almost this freeze. they know what a good solution would be, and it would be helpful, but in some respects, they're kind of stuck in this spot and don't have the energy to even put out there to take the steps forward, which they know intellectually in the end, to be in a better place. You know, it's just so much change that we've been undergone and so much uncertainty. It can freeze people.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Like I said, I'm sorry I have to hop off in 3 minutes. So maybe instead of sharing the language, I suppose we can just kind of talk about, or I'll just pull it up real quick. But what I was looking through the charges of the other committees, and they're pretty high level, so I don't think we need to do anything crazy here. But there wasn't one for curriculum, Monique, which is why we thought we would come up with one. If I can get my screen. So similar to the finance committee, I see our role really just making sure that we're kind of like ensuring that there's transparency and visibility and accountability into the curriculum, and not necessarily, unlike policy where we kind of own those policies and create them. It's really just make sure that you have the tools necessary to do your job, and that it's actually getting done and implemented. So can you guys see this, or do you need me to make it bigger? Just give you a chance to read that. You can think about it and provide some revisions if you want by email. I would like to be able to share it at our next or upcoming board meeting. So if you have any recommendations or changes, like send them my way. But any initial thoughts?
I like it. How's that?
I like it as well. I was thinking, yeah, that alignment is key. I was just looking at, you know, engaging and monitoring curriculum instruction assessment and professional development for improvements, which is pretty much what you've captured.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So if you guys are happy with that, or if Monique, if you want to send me what you have and maybe we can kind of merge the two, whatever you prefer.
I'll send it to you. I don't know that it's going to add anything.
Okay. Sounds good. So given the changes that we agreed to in terms of meeting minutes and stuff like that, so I captured one action around the communications. So I'll go ahead and add that. I'll update our agenda. Monique, I'll add the links that you sent into the agenda so we can post those. And then I'll add the decision we made around the charge in there as well. And I'll ask Kelly to repost that as meeting minutes. Cool.
Yeah.
Anything else, guys?
3 o'clock on the dot. Nice
Yeah.
work.
Good job, Sarah.
Pay me the big bucks, guys. Everyone.
Bye.